I wake up with marks on my body after nights I can't remember. I woke up this morning staring at bruises that weren't there yesterday, their dark purple veins snaking across my arms and back like someone had drawn them there while I slept. My skin felt tender and foreign, my body unfamiliar to me, as though it had been borrowed and returned with evidence of something I could not comprehend. If you've ever felt the eerie unease of waking up as a stranger to your own body, you'll understand the helplessness that filled me. Before we dive further, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, leave a comment sharing your own experiences, and hit the like button if you dare to confront the unknown. My name is Alex. I'm 27, living in a small apartment in Portland, Maine, with a quiet routine, work, a few friends, and nights that were supposed to be mine alone. But for the past 3 weeks, the nights have become something I cannot recall, and the mornings have left me terrified. I first noticed it after a particularly exhausting day at work. I returned home around 10, ate something I barely remember, and passed out in my bedroom. The next morning, I felt pain in places I didn't remember injuring. I assumed it was stress, tension, or maybe the result of a restless sleep. But the bruises were vivid and unnatural, shaped like patterns rather than accidental bumps. On my forearm, I saw a series of crescent-like arcs. On my back, a diagonal streak that seemed deliberate. I have no memory of anyone being near me. My apartment is small, with only one entry door that locks automatically at night. No one could have come in. The thought should have comforted me, but it didn't. The notion of waking up to marks I didn't earn, inflicted by an unknown presence, was far worse than any logical explanation I could muster. I began documenting everything. Each morning, I photographed the marks, noting their shape, size, and position. It quickly became a disturbing ritual. I compared them from day to day, noticing a subtle progression. Some marks were fading, but new ones appeared overnight. They were not random, they seemed purposeful. It was as though someone, or something, was communicating through pain and skin, leaving messages I could not decipher. Sleep became an enemy. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing the window, anything that could reassure me I was alone. But as soon as I closed my eyes, the anticipation of what awaited me in the morning made my body tense, muscles rigid against the mattress. I would eventually drift off, exhausted, only to wake with the new marks. It was a relentless cycle, and the terror of the unknown gnawed at my mind. I confided in my best friend, Emily, hoping for rationality. She laughed nervously at first, suggesting stress or maybe a sleep disorder, but I could see the fear growing in her eyes as I showed her the photographs. She didn't say it aloud, but I knew she thought the same thing I feared. This was not normal. No explanation fit what was happening to me. The third week, the marks began forming shapes. Not letters or recognizable symbols, but shapes that triggered a primal unease in me. One morning, I discovered a circular pattern on my shoulder, like a claw or talon had pressed into my flesh repeatedly. The edges were too precise to be accidental, yet I had been alone. The circle felt like a signature, a mark of ownership. Fear became a physical weight in my chest, pressing down on me until it was nearly impossible to breathe. I began recording my sleep. I placed my phone on the nightstand, pointed toward the bed, and pressed record. I wanted proof, any evidence to explain or confront this growing horror. The first night's footage was unremarkable, dark, grainy, the occasional shift of shadows, but my body shifted unnaturally during sleep, muscles tensing as if I were fighting something invisible. I didn't see anything, but the subtle movements were enough to convince me I was not alone in some way. The night stretched on. I noticed small things changing in the apartment, subtle disturbances I couldn't explain. The pillow not in its original position, the faint smell of something metallic, the sensation of being watched. I started sleeping with the door slightly ajar to see if anyone, or anything, entered. Nothing ever did, yet I could feel a presence, a weight pressing against the edge of perception. The marks were constant reminders. I was not as safe as I thought. On the fourth week, I reached a breaking point. I woke up to find deep gouges across my forearm, not bruises this time, but scratches, fresh and raw. My skin burned and stung as if I had clawed it myself, but I have no memory of doing so. Panic consumed me. I felt invaded in the most intimate way, my body no longer a sanctuary, but a canvas for an unseen entity. I spent hours in the bathroom, examining the scratches under harsh light, every contour and indentation burned into my mind. Sleep became optional. I stayed awake for 2 nights straight, pacing my apartment, trying to remain vigilant, trying to regain control of my body. The absence of sleep left my mind fraying, and the terror of what I would find in the morning became almost unbearable. I felt trapped in a cycle I could not escape. The night would come, and no matter how I tried to resist, morning would bring new marks. Emily came over after I sent her desperate texts. She stayed with me, insisting we could figure out what was happening. But even with company, the marks appeared. I awoke to find lines and bruises across my torso, shapes that made me recoil in horror. Emily was terrified, unable to rationalize it, and I could not comfort her. It was as if the apartment itself had changed into a space of domination, where my body was no longer my own. By the 5th week, I could no longer ignore the patterns. I began drawing connections between the marks, mapping them across my arms, back, and torso. They formed sequences, arcs that seemed intentional. The thought that I was being marked for something, chosen maybe, made my blood run cold. I had no way to stop it, no way to understand it. I began to dread closing my eyes, knowing what awaited me when I opened them again. The physical pain was secondary to the psychological terror. Each mark brought anxiety, paranoia, and a sense of violation deeper than physical sensation could convey. I stopped leaving the apartment at night, fearing encounters with anyone who might explain, or worsen, the situation. My work suffered, my friends withdrew, my life became a shadow of what it once was. And yet, the marks continued. On the morning of the 43rd day, I woke to find something different. The bruises and scratches coalesced into a shape I could not comprehend. It was larger, more deliberate, stretching across my shoulders and down my spine. I stared in the mirror for what felt like hours, unable to process the grotesque pattern, the clear intent behind it. This was no longer random. This was communication. I am Alex, and I wake up every morning marked by a presence I cannot see or fight. Every night holds the promise of more, every morning delivers the horror anew. I do not know what is happening to me, but I know it is intentional, and it is waiting for me to discover its meaning. If you've ever woken up to your body betraying you, you'll understand the fear that now dictates every moment of my life. Sleep is no longer rest. It is a battleground. And the marks are the proof that I am losing night after night. I tried to escape the apartment, thinking distance would save me. I left Portland for a weekend, hoping the quiet of the coast, the endless gray of the Atlantic, would offer reprieve. But when I returned on Monday morning, I found new marks etched across my chest and neck, fresh and deep, impossibly precise. I had slept alone in a motel room. No one had touched me. I felt the panic rise like bile in my throat, realizing there was no escape. Whatever it was, it followed me, invisible, patient, and deliberate. The shapes were worse now. No longer random arcs or streaks, the bruises formed figures, almost humanoid, distorted and clawed, as though someone had pressed a body against mine while I was unconscious. I began seeing them even before waking, flashes in my peripheral vision, shadows I could not identify, movements too quick for me to track. I tried to tell myself it was paranoia, the brain's desperate attempt to rationalize trauma. But the pain in my body, the raw, pressing reality of the marks, refused explanation. I stopped sleeping on my back. I tried different positions, sleeping in chairs, on the floor, even in the bathtub. Nothing mattered. I would wake with new evidence of intrusion, the shapes escalating in both size and cruelty. The fear was no longer simply about the marks, it was about control. My body was no longer mine. Every night, I felt it slipping further away, as though some dark force was rehearsing ownership. Emily tried again, urging me to see a specialist, someone who could rationalize the disorder, a sleep study, anything. I agreed, desperate. The sleep clinic monitored me for 3 nights. The cameras showed nothing. No one entered my room. No abnormal movements captured, except for slight tension in my muscles as I shifted in the dark. The doctors offered no explanation. One mentioned parasomnia, another said sleep-related dissociation. Their words sounded hollow, meaningless. They didn't see the clawed figures on my skin, the bruises forming messages I couldn't yet read. I started documenting everything beyond photographs. I kept notebooks, sketching the marks, noting positions, timing, size, and shape. Patterns emerged. They were not random. I became obsessive. Every bruise, scratch, and indentation seemed to correspond to my thoughts, my fears, my moods, almost as if the entity marking me was alive and aware, responsive. The realization sent chills that no mattress or blanket could dispel. I was being studied, measured, catalogued. My nights were laboratories, my body a specimen. One morning, I woke to discover a message in braille-like dots pressed across my forearm. I didn't notice it at first until I ran my fingers over the raised bumps. It spelled a name, my name, but stretched and distorted across my arm in a way that was grotesque and deliberate. Whoever, or whatever, was doing this was playing a game I did not understand. The sense of being watched deepened. I no longer felt alone in the apartment, even when Emily stayed with me, even when daylight spilled through the windows. The psychological toll was immense. I stopped interacting with friends, avoided mirrors, and abandoned routines. Each day became a countdown to the next night, each night a descent into terror. I didn't eat consistently, I didn't speak much. The marks demanded my attention, consumed my thoughts, and dominated my existence. Sleep was now both dread and obligation, a cycle that would inevitably produce new horrors. Then came the whispers. At first, I thought they were my imagination, echoes of exhaustion. But they became distinct, subtle, almost inaudible under my breath. Sometimes I caught fragments. My name, questions I hadn't asked, statements about things I hadn't done. They weren't consistent, but they were intelligent. Watching. Patient. I tried recording audio during sleep, hoping to capture the source, but the playback was just static and faint murmurs I couldn't decipher. It was maddening. I stopped attempting rational thought. I stopped questioning whether this was supernatural or psychological. It didn't matter. What mattered was survival, and I didn't know how. Each morning I woke to new patterns, bruises that now extended across my torso, hands, and legs, scratches that traced spirals, circles, and sharp lines in places I couldn't reach. They felt ritualistic. I feared I was being prepared for something, groomed for an event I did not yet comprehend. Emily begged me to leave the apartment again. I tried, but no distance mattered. One morning, I woke to find the new marks formed an arrow pointing downward across my chest. Beneath it, a fresh, dark bruise that resembled a keyhole had appeared. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. I began to feel fear in ways that went beyond pain, a primal terror that my body would soon be used for purposes I could not survive. I became increasingly isolated. Work emails went unanswered. Food was delivered but barely consumed. I couldn't face people, couldn't explain what was happening without sounding insane. And yet, the marks continued. Every night I fought sleep, every morning I found new evidence of the entity's presence. My apartment was no longer my sanctuary, it was a cage. One night, in desperation, I recorded video continuously with night vision, the camera fixed to capture the bed and surrounding floor. I slept fitfully, muscles tense. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. My stomach dropped. Around 3 in the morning, a shadow passed over the bed, elongated and malformed, its shape impossible to define. My body twitched violently, yet no one touched me. The shadow paused, lingered, and then retreated. I couldn't see a face, a form, or an identifiable presence. Yet the next day, my body bore new marks, more precise, more terrifying, more deliberate than ever. I realized I had no defense. No locks, no distance, no recordings, no interventions would protect me. My body had been invaded, catalogued, and marked repeatedly. The psychological weight was unbearable. I began to dream of sleep as a predator, each night a ritual that left me scarred, helpless, and terrified. The entity was patient, methodical, and cruel. And then I noticed it. Not on my skin, not in the photographs, not in recordings, but in my reflection. A subtle distortion, a shift in the mirror's surface as I brushed my teeth, looked at myself preparing for the day, or washed the marks in hot water. Something was watching me from that reflection, waiting, aware, feeding off my fear. I stopped looking in mirrors. I realized I was no longer Alex as I once was. The person I used to be existed only in fragments, memories that now felt borrowed. I had become a host, an observer of my own life, a vessel for an unknown intelligence that used my body to communicate, to mark, and to torment. I have no answers. I have only fear, and the marks that grow and shift, as if anticipating something. I live now in the constant dread of nightfall. I avoid sleep for as long as I can, but eventually exhaustion drags me down. Each time I close my eyes, I know the entity will return. Each morning I wake with fresh evidence of its presence, a reminder that I am powerless. The apartment is a witness, the walls silent, my body a canvas for horror beyond comprehension. I don't know what it wants, why it chose me, or how long this cycle will continue. I don't know if I will survive, if I will wake tomorrow, or if the marks will eventually end in something permanent. But I do know this: sleep is no longer my refuge, my body no longer my own, and the horror I live with is relentless, invisible, and intimate. If you felt the terror of your own body betraying you, imagine living it every single night. Don't turn away. Subscribe, leave a comment sharing your darkest experiences, and hit like if you dare to confront what lurks when you sleep.